So I think in order to understand what has happened in the last 10 years in Bend Park and Recreation, it's really important to look back over the last 100 years. Our city was incorporated in 1904 and 1910 is when they built Muir Pond. 1920 though, 100 years ago this year, was the year that Drake Park and Sheldon Park were both donated to the city of Bend. So our park system is 100 years old. Now, if you look at population, in the first 80 years of our existence, our population grew by about 50,000. In the last 20 years, our population has grown another 50,000. So our park system over the last 20 years has doubled in size, and we're serving more than twice the population than we were only 20 years ago. So the way that we have been able to accomplish this challenge, I think, is how we put parks on the ground. Our goal is to have a park within walking distance of a half a mile to every resident in town. So we do a good job of that by providing neighborhood parks and some community parks. And we've added about 15 or so neighborhood parks in the last 20 years. Of that, about 7 of those have been added in the last 10. Also, in the last 10 years, we've added some larger facilities that serve a little bit different function than we have in the past. We've added the Bend Whitewater Park, the Pavilion, Riley Ranch Nature Reserve, to name a few. And also, beginning in January, we hope to open the Larkspur Center, which is a new indoor facility that will be attached to the Bend Senior Center. And the new facility will be more active to serve older adults and also people of all ages in the evenings and on weekends, that will function similar to the way that Juniper Swim and Fitness Center functions. So I think it's really important to know what's happened in the last 10 years, and the challenge has been primarily around growth and how we manage growth for this community. We see Bend as a community that people want to live in. In order to live in communities, people want to have good access to recreation. And so we think that that is our role in being able to make Bend what it is. But also over the last few years, serving a more diverse population has also been a challenge. So we're seeing now that as we grow, our population becomes more diverse and their needs for recreation services is growing with that. So we're seeing a lot of different types of recreation facilities go in than what we may have seen, 30, 40, or 50 years ago. So I think over the next 10 years, we're going to see growth be similar to the way that we have in the past. But if you think a little bit about how Bend is growing, just the composition of our growth is going to be different. We're going to be a more dense population. We're going to see a lot more growth going up rather than out. We're going to see more apartment complexes go in than what we have in the past, and we're going to see a lot smaller yards in people's homes. And so the demand for parks in our community is going to change. Used to, people could get outdoors in their backyard. They had space for their dogs, or animals in the backyard. Now they rely upon parks to meet a lot of those needs. So over the next 10 years, I think we're going to see a higher demand on the park service, which means that we are going to have to provide parks in a different way. If those ways are going to require that we do a better job with partnerships and collaboration with others, it's going to mean that we have to be resourceful and looking at how we work with the development community and providing parks in our community, and also recreation programs. As our population becomes more and more diverse, the recreation need for those population is going to continue to change as it has in the past, but also financial ability to be able to receive the municipal services that people have enjoyed in this town is going to become more difficult, and that's going to be incumbent upon all of us in the public sector to be able to find creative ways to offer services to the population that we serve. One of the biggest challenges that I think we're going to see moving forward is funding for park and recreation is going to become more difficult to come by. Relying on the funding sources that we have now to continue to build the park system is probably going to be deficient over the next few years, and we're going to have to find different ways of funding the park system. A lot of that's going to be through collaborative efforts. But also resource pressures that we're going to have on us as a larger community is going to make it more difficult to fund recreation in this town. For example, homelessness population in the town, meeting underserved populations needs, Transportation is going to be a growing pressure in our community, and finding ways to have a more active transportation system will be a challenge. So I think looking forward, we're going to have to find ways to work together better than we have in the past, particularly on things like active transportation, where people can find ways to get around our community, either on bike or on foot. It also provides for a healthier, safer community when people can move about our community more easily on foot. So for us to be able to do that and to meet our mission to be able to accomplish that, we're going to have to have good partnerships with agencies like the City of Bend and irrigation districts, and being able to use ditch rider roads as an example of how we can make better use of the resources that we have available to be able to provide an active transportation system in our community. The good news, though, is that Park and Recreation District does have a comprehensive plan that we follow pretty closely. Most park and recreation agencies, they do a plan that looks out over a 20-year time period. Ours looks out over a 10-year time period. And the reason why we did that is because our community is changing so quickly that we need to be able to address this change as quickly as we can. And so by shortening that planning window, it allows us to take a look at how our community currently exists and being able to meet those needs and pressures that we have to develop this park system. You know, if you think about what our population has been like over the last 100 years, where we've grown 100,000 people in 100 years, 50,000 people in 20 years, it's likely that our population is going to double again in another 30 to 40 years. So if you think for a minute, what are we going to be like 30 years from now? We could be 200,000 population in 30 years. So what do we need to do to be able to continue to maintain a livable community for our population if our population is going to double over the next 30 years? So the park system itself has to grow, and finding the funding during these challenging times whenever our city is going to see more and more challenges ahead of us is, I think, going to be one of the biggest challenges we have in being able to continue to maintain the small town atmosphere that Bend has as we become more urbanized. So that's probably the biggest challenges that I see looking forward in the future. But I think in order to get there, we do a good job in planning, looking forward, and trying to provide the resources that we need to meet a changing demographic within our population, and in times when our population is going to continue to grow. I think the one word that comes to mind is we're a dynamic, community. And being dynamic, we find ways of getting things done, and we find ways to work together to meet those challenges. And we've done it in the past, and we'll continue to do it in the future.